Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode, the first of the season, episode 71, our NPL season preview. The boys are back. Michael, how's it going today?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Mac. It's great to be back. We've gone through this stage 3 times now, where the end of the season is done, and then you got to wait all this time for the following season to start. But it's great to be sort of back into the thick of it, and definitely keen to dissect all the NPL clubs, what they've gotten up to, because as we're going to talk about, there's been a whole heap of changes throughout all the different clubs. So keen to break that down with both of you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, and the reason why I went like this is because Michael's a little salty today because Inter lost to Juve 1-0 via a possible 3 handballs before.
This isn't the Serie A show, mate. This is the Canberra football show, mate. We can move on.
So I had to just dig that in before we start. And a man that is happy because his team won, and Michael's team as well, Manchester United. Russ, how's it going today? Glad to have you back.
Great to be back as well, guys. I feel like I haven't been away, what with the Liberty A-League and the Capital Futsal League and everything else that's been going on. It's been great. But yeah, just hold it in check, Michael, because if everything goes according to plan in the Europa League, United are playing Juventus in the semis.
That's true.
So, you know.
bit of
that could live for a while.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's good to be back though, guys. Great to be back on the football show, and looking forward to the start of the new season.
Yeah, before we get cracking on the preview, let's quickly mention a few things before we get started. Huge news a couple of days ago. The APL have announced Canberra. They've identified them as an area of expansion that they want for the league. Not 100% official, but it seems very close from all accounts. What are your thoughts on that, Russ? That's huge. I know you were involved in the initial bid with Kaj and the others. I remember one of those stand-up things that this was before we started the show at the Hellenic Club that you talked at with them. This has been a long time in the making, and then Jeff Williamson for that. So yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, it's been going for a while. I was involved with Ivan Slavic's bid actually in the way back when. I can't even remember when that was. It was such a long time ago as well. But isn't it great news that it's not quite done? It's not quite done yet. They've got to find the investors, but I'm hopeful that it'll happen. It's fantastic news for football in Canberra. The important thing is, though, it's not just good enough to have a team. It's all of us now, and all our mates, and everyone who watches this show, and everyone who plays football, going out and watching this side. It's no good just having a team there and nobody watching it, because then they'll just turn around after a few years and go, well, there's no market for it. But we need to get out now. Once it's all confirmed and the signings start coming in and all the stuff that goes with it, it's important that everybody now gets off their butts and gets to the ground wherever it's going to be played and watches the team and gets behind them. And I like to think we all will, which should be great because we've been waiting for this for ages.
Yeah, no, 100% agree on that front. And Gungahlin in Canberra, Croatia, also huge news for them. Submitted EOIs, expressions of interests for the national second division. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, this isn't a cheap endeavor for either side, so a lot of sponsors, and they've obviously will get a lot of sponsors on board if either team is successful.
A lot of work for both clubs to do, of course, to get across the line in that one if they get given the nod. But they're two very ambitious football clubs that we have in Canberra, and credit to the committees and everybody involved with those bids to get the EOI across the line and suggest that they can financially run those teams in a second division. And the more top flight football and second division football we get in Canberra, the better. So I wish them both the very best of luck, and hopefully we get a second division team to go with an A-League team, and there'll just be so much football to watch. It'll be great.
It certainly will, and all year round as well, in terms of A-League, and then second division most likely will be like how the NPL clubs do it. So that will certainly be interesting. So best of luck to both those teams also. And Bar TV Sports is back, Russ. You've been on the we were on the calls in futsal, and then you guys have had the FFA Cup matches and the Charity Shield. So you've had a few matches, but Bar TV's back. And what can people expect? It's more than just the two first grade leagues in women's and men's this year.
Yeah, women's and men's will be free for everybody on Bar TV. You can just log on to bartvsports.com and watch that, which is going to be great. The under-23s men's and the reserve grade women's will be behind a paywall. We'll be announcing the details of that. It's a monthly fee, but for that monthly fee, you don't just get the women's under reserves and men's under 23s. It'd be like your KO subscription. You get all the sport that's across the Bar TV package. There's tons of it from all around Australia, you know, depending on what you love, from soccer and football rather, and rugby and league and touch footy and frisbee, whatever they've got on, you can access all of it. But for locally, we'll have the two the reserves and under 23 grades behind that paywall, which will go some way towards offsetting the costs of being able to show it. We missed it last year. The funding for it wasn't there. This is a way that we can get it back on there. And if people are keen to watch it, then yeah, please do subscribe and do so. Bar TV is going to be great as well. It's got a fantastic coaches and analytic portal tucked in the back end of it. I had a little play with it today. You can get lost in there for hours. I'll give you guys some access so you can cut clips. You don't even need to cut your clips. They're already there for you. You can look at goals, corners, free kicks. Everything is time stamped. You just go in, you take your clips that you want off. You can make your own highlights packages. Clubs are going to love it. Coaches are going to love it because it's going to save them hours. They can straight away look at, here's all the corners the opposition have had, put them all in a little package, send it out to their team to look at as well. It's going to be a bit of a game changer for them, I think, and for us guys as well. For us to utilize on shows like this, you can have a little bit of highlights package to chuck on the front of your live show, and we won't mind doing that. We'll work with you along those kind of things. So it's going to be fantastic. It's great to have them back. Clutch did a job for us last year on NPL TV. Had a few issues at times, but you know, I think Bar TV just works for us as an organisation. It works for us as a community, the size of us as well. They've done a terrific job with Northern New South Wales, and it's good to have them back on board. They're a one-stop shop, and they know how we work, and we know how they work. So I'm very positive it's going to go very well.
Yeah, that's awesome, and you could just see the positive comments once that was announced. So everyone's glad to have them back on board. That will, of course, lead us into the season. Let's start with our first team. Is the reigning league champions from last season, Canberra Croatia, coached by Dean Ugrinich. Their 2022 position was first place. Their points and win-loss record was 14 wins, 5 draws, and 2 losses, 44 points overall. Like I said, they were the league champions of the year. They were the grand final runners-up in the NPL grand final, and they most recently won the Charity Shield in 2023. Not the end to the season, like we mentioned, going down to Monaro in a pretty tight final. Doesn't take away their stellar league campaign. They went through the league as the standard bearers of the competition. Like I mentioned, only lost twice during league play. And even with their loss in the final, when you add up all those losses, that's still less than everybody else had in the competition last season. So that's not to take away the great season they had, even though they didn't come out on top in the end. But they came out ready for redemption against Monaro in that Charity Shield, coming out 4-1 victors. And naturally, they probably won't be getting carried away with the Charity Shield win. However, that's a great way to start the season nonetheless. And I guess what I took away from that was lots of opportunities given to those young players. And some of the 23s players from last season came in for some of the players that were absent. So that was really good to see. Dean Ugrinich, of course, back on board, very experienced coach in the league. They've added the likes of Daniel Sparrow and Kaz Patafta, so both of them, they're 2 quality signings. They've lost the likes of Teneski and Tanoski, though, just to name a couple, and they were, of course, pivotal to Croatia last season, so some big losses there. Before the Charity Shield, not really a lot of chatter about Canberra Croatia, sort of similar to last year, but after the Charity Shield and their impressive win as well against Tigers, I'm sure they've proved again that as Canberra Croatia are, they'll always be there or thereabouts. I can't even remember the last time they didn't make the top 4. Maybe you can answer that for me, Russ, if you can remember from the top of your head. What are your thoughts of Canberra Croatia heading into this campaign? And feel free to add any more of the ins and outs to the couple I just mentioned there.
Yeah, I've been very impressed by them so far, what I've seen in the Charity Shield and the win over Tigers. They brought in Frank Greco, who's been excellent in their midfield for them. He was superb. They've got so much quality that they've won those 2 games without a quartet of attackers. You mentioned the likes of Kaz Patafta. Jason Ugrinich wasn't there. Stephen Dominici wasn't there. And they've signed Lukman Ahmed Shaibu from Sutherland Sharks as well. He played for Monaro Panthers for a while, a couple of years back. So they've got 4 out-and-out strikers there that weren't involved in the wins. They had 4 over the Panthers and 3-1 over the Tigers. The young boys have been incredibly good, though. Cassidy Tando and Mate Busek, who came through the ranks there via other clubs via Tuggeranong as well, have moved on, and they've just replaced them. It's like a conveyor belt of talent. Jack Leverett came in at right back, and he was very, very good. They've David Cecilia's kicked on. Young Noah van der Poel played on the weekend, scored a goal, and was excellent. They've just got so many good players in this team. But the key one signing for me might well turn out to be Daniel Sparrow. From Tigers. He definitely had a point to prove against them on the weekend in the cup tie. He was outstanding in that midfield. And we all know what we're going to get with Daniel Sparrow. If we can get a fit Daniel Sparrow on the park, football in Canberra is going to be better for it, because he's such a character and he brings such good quality to the teams he plays for. Really looking forward to see how he melds into this side. As you mentioned, though, not many in, not many out. It's a standard for Canberra, Croatia, and they're going to be there or thereabouts again. Been very impressed by them. Had a good pre-season. Dean wasn't there for the last 2 weeks. He's been sunning himself in Fiji on a holiday, so he'll be nice and relaxed when he comes back for round one as well. And they've got the nice, easy Chivapi derby up first against O'Connor Knights. It'd be fantastic. What a way to start the season. So yeah, they've lost a few key players. They've replaced them with good quality. They're going to be difficult to beat again.
Indeed, it's going to be an interesting way to start the season. Michael, who do we have next up?
Next up, Matt, we have Canberra Olympic, who are coached by Paulo Makor. They finished fifth in 2022 last season. Their points and win-loss record was 7 wins, 5 draws, and 9 losses for 26 points. Like I mentioned, fifth position for Olympic last season, so they narrowly missed out on finals football. It pretty much came down right to the wire, if I remember correctly, against the O'Connor Knights, who snuck in there just inside the top 4. Regardless, it was still, I think, a very good season from Olympic last year, given the fact that maybe not a lot of people thought that they were going to be challenging for the top 4. But I thought, there were certain performances during the season last year that made you think that this team has the potential to be really good once they sort of put it all together. And I think that they'll have in their minds of sort of making that extra step this season in 2023 to get themselves into the top 4. We know that their coach, Makor, he has plenty of experience coaching at this level with his title-winning pedigree. So they have a great leader on the sidelines to sort of guide this team forward. And, I expect a lot from Canberra Olympic this season. Last season I thought that they had a great mixture of sort of youth and experienced players throughout their sort of starting lineup, and even on the bench as well. So just to mention sort of a few key additions to the team, you've got Thomas James, Callum Smith, and Isaac Clements. So 3 sort of good notable additions there. And some key departures for this team is Asosa Ihegi, Oliver Whitaker, and Simon Rohan Jones. So you've got Ihegi and Rohan Jones there, who were very good players for Olympic last season, 2 crucial men. So they've got 2, critical departures there, but, they've made some really good additions to this team. And like I said, I think that they can have the potential to have a really good season. Russ, what are your thoughts on how Olympic are going to head into this campaign? And obviously feel free to disclose any sort of ins and outs that I didn't mention there. But like I said, they sort of narrowly missed out last season. A lot of positives to take out of it. What's your take?
Yeah, it's exciting times for Canberra Olympic. They've brought in some really big names. You mentioned a couple of them. Lasse Ulrich is another one that's come across from Tigers to help bolster their defence. He'll replace Daniel Lindstedt, who I understand is not going to play this year. There's a potential of another striker signing coming this week. I won't mention that just yet, just in case it doesn't come off. But that would give them, they've already got a very frightening front 3 in Thomas James, Luca Flores, and Nick Popovic. And Popovic is probably their key man for me at the moment. He's been in sensational form in pre-season. He scored a hat-trick against Newcastle Olympic. He got 4 against ANU, and then he got both goals in that narrow cup victory over Tuggeranong United. That match, they were missing a couple of players. Of course, Nathan Medjic didn't play, Thomas James didn't play, but exposed a couple of things about them that other teams would look at and go, well, maybe we can counter there. But also showed how good they were in going forward and coming back from a deficit. They've got a mix of youth and experience, as you mentioned. Paul McCall's been pretty upbeat with what he's signed. I think he's really excited to have Thomas James back in the ranks, and who wouldn't be? The guy's an X factor and a game changer, and he's going to make a big difference to that Canberra Olympic team. But they do have some really good young players through that group as well, and defensively they looked pretty strong. Maybe there's a little bit of lack of pace in that back too, in the centre back pairing. I'm not entirely sure. We'll wait and see how that works out. But the fullbacks are more than quick enough to cover for them, and they were really good in the game I saw against Tuggeranong. Very important season for them as well. They're not used to being outside the top four. They're one of our big clubs in Canberra, of course, and they'll expect to be pushing for finals, if not higher up the table and pushing for that number one spot. Have they got the players to do it? Well, they do. They've lost a few, like you mentioned. Seamus Carr's another absentee. He's moved into state. He had a good season in defence for them last year. But they've certainly got the players in that squad, and the calibre of the coaching. And Paul McCoy has been there and done it all himself, and Danny with him as well, to certainly push for the title this year.
Absolutely. Matt, who do we have next up?
Next up is Gungahlin United. Gungahlin United, obviously coached by Chris Cajano, taking over from Marcel Munoz. 2022 position was second place, and their win-loss record last season was 12 wins, 4 draws, and 5 losses, 40 points overall in the league. Gungahlin did quite well in the league last season. Like I mentioned, second. They finished pretty strongly as well. They had a little bit of a mid-season slump, and unfortunately for them, they lost consecutively in the final series to Croatia and then Monaro, who eliminated them last and obviously went on to win the whole thing. Like I mentioned before, Chris Cajano officially takes over the first grade squad for the first time. He has been in that Gungahlin setup for a while now. He coached the 23s a couple of years back. He's been the assistant coach for a number of years now. So he knows the system. He knows a lot of these players. Obviously, he has the links to the players coming up from the 23s and so on. So it'll be really interesting to see how Chris does. We all know he's a quality coach, so let's see how he does in terms of the first grade. Gungahlin have, and I guess a major bit as well, as they've retained quite a lot of their core players, which is always key. And they've also added the likes of Max Green and Jackson Paisler, who we both know are quality players joining from Belco and the Wanderers from last season. And they have had a few departures. Jeremy Habtemariam and Will Roberts have both moved to clubs in Melbourne, and Pariah Cullen and Milesevic, to name a couple, have joined the Mariners Academy, which won't be the first time we've said that today. So it's good to see, and it looks to see that the Capital All-Stars as well was a bigger factor into a lot of these players getting the opportunity of the Mariners Academy, which is awesome to see as well. But in terms of Gungahlin, they still have a very strong squad, like Russell mentioned, I'm sure, and we've got a very competitive comp this year, and I'm sure Gungahlin will be one of those teams vying for that top 4. Russ, what do you make of Gungahlin United this season? And like I said, feel free to add any ins and outs that I didn't mention.
Much the same as we got last year, I think. They'll keep a lot of possession. We saw that in the cup tie with O'Connor Knights on Friday night. They keep the ball well. They like to play possession football. They've got the ability in their midfield and in the backs with Buddy Abbas and Jack Green. And then that midfield trio they played in the week, Josh Gaspari, Anthony Timotheo, who's joined from the Tigers back to Gungahlin United, in that midfield trio with Tom McLaughlin as well, to pick passes through and over the opposition defence. And when you've got the pace of Max Green and Felipe Bernabeu Madrid up top, you're going to score goals. And we saw that with Max Green's finishing ability on the weekend. He missed a couple of chances early on in that cup tie, but then scored 2 cracking goals to put them through. You mentioned the departures. Robert Kachenko's also left, the fullback, and Nick Rathjen has dropped down a couple of divisions to play for Bell North as he focuses on his futsal Rouge career as well. So there are a couple of big losses for them, as alongside the ones you mentioned with Jeremy Habtemariam. Wish him luck, actually, down in Brunswick, Juventus, where he is at the moment. Gungahlin play, as we say, neat and tidy. They've got ability to keep clean sheets. They've got a very good goalkeeper in Jacob Quinn. They've got goal scorers at the other end of the park. I quite like the signing of Jackson Paisley for them as well. He adds a lot of quality to that side. It's such a close competition this year. I'm not really sure where they're going to finish. Last year, like you said, they got to finals. They will be disappointed that they didn't do better than what they did. Knocked out by, I think it was the Panthers, if memory serves me right, in the prelim. And it's one of those things where promotion from internally in the shape of Chris Caggiano for Marcel Munoz means that there's no real drop off in how the team will train and how the team will be prepared, because they've all seen it and done it. It's nothing new for them. Maybe that's their downside. Maybe that will be their weakness come the end of the season. Everyone's seen them, what they've done before. Maybe Chris Caggiano's got something up his sleeves. I'm sure he does. Maybe he's got a couple of new signings to come in. I'm sure there's potential for them as well. But again, like the ones we've already mentioned, they're going to be there or thereabouts to the end of the year. They'll play some wonderful football and they'll be well worth a watch.
They certainly will. And yeah, great point about how competitive this comp's going to be this year. It's like if anyone does like a top 4 prediction or something, like if you just ask them, it would just be very difficult to pick, because everyone seems to have added and quality this year. So it's going to be really, really interesting. Michael, who do we have next up?
Just quickly, did Leon Mikkel take an opportunity in Germany as well?
Yep. Also, yeah.
So again, I think that just sort of speaks to some of the awesome opportunities that you were talking about before, Matt, with some of the personnel that have taken opportunities outside of Canberra. And obviously to, take your footballing career to Germany is a massive step. So congratulations to Leon on that, and wishing well. But we'll move on now to the Monaro Panthers, who are coached by Ian Worthington. So a coach change there for the Panthers. Their 2022 position was 3rd in the table. Their points and win-loss record, 9 wins, 8 draws, and 4 losses for 35 points. They were obviously the 2022 NPL Grand Final winners. They were also the 2022 Oz Cup qualifying final winners as well. And as we had already discussed earlier in this show, Canberra Croatia won the Charity Shield against Monaro Panthers. So they were runners-up on this occasion. Obviously, coming into this season, they're coming on the back of, winning the grand final last season, obviously doing well in the Oz Cup as well. So even though I think, obviously the departure of Frank Keisha will be a huge loss for the Panthers, because we know what a great coach Frank is in Canberra football. But, they have a very experienced replacement in Ian and Worthington, who's been involved with the Monaro Panthers setup for a very long time. So I think it sort of will help them having someone taking over in that position that knows the ins and out of the club and the players there. So it should be a relatively sort of smooth transition. Of course, he'll want to implement his ideas that might be a little bit different to what Frank was doing, but nevertheless, it's a very good appointment for the Monaro Panthers. And, we've talked about in previous years on this show, sort of the struggles that they have endured for multiple seasons. And then they've come into, a new season sort of, having something to prove. Whereas, the narrative's a little bit different this time around, because they had such an excellent season last year that may or may not have taken a few people by surprise, and now they'll be looking to, do even better this time around. So there's a lot of optimism around the Monaro Panthers coming into 2023. So I think they're going to do very, very well. So some key additions for the Panthers for the 2023 season. They've got Rocco Stricker that's come across from Tigers. They've got Sam Rosterbacken back. And another key addition that I think is a really good signing for them is Connor Minot-Smith, one of the best sort of young players that we've got in the NPL. Everyone saw his quality last year for the O'Connor Knights. He's a great young player, so he's going to be a very good, handy addition for the Panthers. In saying that, though, they've had a few key departures as well in Emilio Kishta, Nico Kalfas, and Josh Calabria. So 3 players there that were very essential to the Panthers' sort of cause for their great season last year have now left the club. Russ, what are your sort of views on Monaro? Obviously, they had a fantastic 2022. Can they carry this into 2023?
Well, I was joking with Ian Worthington after you win the Charity Shield, the Australia Cup qualifying competition and the grand final. The only thing he can do is win the lot, isn't it? I mean, there's no pressure on him at all. Yeah, they potentially can. They've lost some key players. You mentioned there's 3 others potentially that you didn't mention. Darren Bailey's moved back to Griffith. Andre Carl, the striker's down in Adelaide now, and Carl Senior, central defenders, moved across to Tigers, which is a big loss to them. They've tried to replace like for like, so you'll see them playing a very similar system, I think. Jenna Cheruti's come in from West Canberra Wanderers, and he told me last night that even though his dad is called Mr. Cerruti at his school, he wants now to be pronounced Ceruti, like the Italian way. So we're going with Ceruti this season. So put that in your diaries, lads, and make sure you get that correct for him.
Can I just say I was pronouncing it like that last year, and then I was corrected. So
yeah, he was. We were as well originally, and we were corrected by Mr. Cerruti, and now we're back to Ceruti again. So swings and roundabouts, mate. Swings and roundabouts. You mentioned Conor Minott-Smith. Christian Kreskas has come across from Belconnen as well. So that's a good signing for them. I'm quite looking forward, and I'm hoping that Ben Obst gets on the park for them as well. He had a knee injury, serious one for the Wanderers last year. It was a big miss for them. They haven't had the best of starts, have they? Zach McLaren's red card in the Charity Shield probably blew that scoreline out, perhaps more than it would have. But they've come through a tricky cup tie away in Wagga on the weekend, and that's where you mentioned Rocco Stricker. He came to the fore. He scored a couple of goals in that one. He's going to be a key signing for them as well. What we might see with Rocco is that last year with the Tigers, they played him at centre-back. The Monaro Panthers have got lots of cover in that area. They've got good holding midfielders. They've got central defenders in James Wilson, David Jenkins, Adam Di Franceschi, to name but 3. They've got holding midfielders. They can play Sam Rusbach, and they can play Benny Basser-Silk. They can play Zach McLaren in those roles if they want to. You know, Gabe Cole is one of the best holding midfielders in the league. So what that will allow them to do is push Rocco Stricker further up the park. We talked about this a lot last year. We think with a player of that quality, you want to get him on the ball in areas of the pitch where he can hurt the opposition. If you've watched him play in the Charity Shield, you would have seen him running back, clearing shots off the line defensively, getting forward, getting shots away as well. He's that dynamic player. He could make a huge difference to this side. And someone like Conor Minott-Smith that you mentioned as well could learn a lot of Rocco Stricker. And I'm really looking forward to see how those 2 guys can gel in this Monaro Panthers outfit. They're going to rely on Michael John for a lot of goals. I think he can potentially come to the party with that. We know how good a finisher he is as well. So again, much like everybody else we've talked about, they'll have eyes on the prize. They finished 3rd last year. The only trophy they didn't get was the league title. Ian Worthington, well, he's a winner. He has been at clubs in the UK that he's been with as well. He was a decent player himself back in the day, and I'm sure he'll bring that mentality into the team. Replacing those big names, though, weren't just big names on the park, big personalities off it and in the changing room as well. Frank Keisha spoke to me about them a lot now that he's going to be on board with us in commentary, and it's going to be interesting to see how they go.
Matt, who do we have next up?
Next up, we have the O'Connor Knights, coached by Miro Tiranic. Their 2022 position was 4th, and their 2022 win and loss record was 8 wins, 3 draws, 10 losses, 27 points overall. The O'Connor Knights had one hell of a return to top-flight football in Canberra last season, finishing in the top 4. Unfortunately for them, their finals run was cut short by eventual winners Monaro in that elimination final. The O'Connor Knights began their recruitment quite early, adding a tremendous amount of depth, especially in their back line, with the likes of Harrison Pallick, Connor Bill, James Driscoll, Lockie Fields, as well as Blaze Blazlowski in midfield. So, as you can all remember, all those players were all from the Wanderers. So I guess one thing Miro won't have to worry about are all those players in defense, giving them time to gel. They've all played last season. You can insert them all and they'll immediately have that chemistry together. Not to mention that they're all good players as well. Alex Tiranic as well mentioned in his preseason interview with me that you can see on Facebook that they felt like they leaked too many goals last season. So they needed to address those issues. So that was part of their recruitment strategy there. They've also, like Michael mentioned before in the Olympic bit, they've added Iso Sarahegi from Canberra Olympic, and we all know his quality. He's a proven goal scorer. He's got great skills, and he's just got tremendous speed as well. He's going to be a huge addition for O'Connor up front. Some of the players that they've lost, Michael mentioned before, Connor Minot-Smith to Monaro, a big loss for them there. Liam Walsh and Keenan Dodd as well, to mention a few. I believe they've both retired. You can correct me there, Russ, if I'm wrong there. But they're two huge losses as well, especially Keenan Dodd, who has been at the O'Connor Knights for many, many years. Noah Steinacker as well as another out. He's joined the Canberra contingent at the Mariners Academy, which is awesome to see. So the O'Connor Knights will be looking to replicate their performance last season. It's going to be an even more competitive comp this season, so it'll be interesting to see where they end up. But we all know the O'Connor Knights are an ambitious club, and they really want to push to try and win things. So it's going to be an interesting season for the O'Connor Knights, and they've definitely recruited well. Russ, what are your thoughts on the O'Connor Knights? Like I mentioned, they're a club that really want to push and be there with the most successful clubs in Canberra. So how do you see them shaping up the season?
I'm massively disappointed that they've tightened up their defence, because they were great to watch. They get 4 at one end, concede 3 at the other, and their matches were brilliant. There was always goals in them. But if you're gonna shore up your defence, the best way to do it is to get a ready-made unit, isn't it? And that's what they've done. You mentioned they went to the Wanderers and they picked across the 4 players, and you could already see on Friday that it was a very strong unit. Harrison Palic on one side, James Driscoll on the other, and the duo of Lachlan Fields and Connor Bill down the middle, and it really made a difference. What we did see, and I did see an awful lot of Lachlan Fields doing it West Canberra Wanderers last year, was him advancing forwards and joining the attack, released from the shackles on a few occasions. Now, whether that was just the nature of the cup tie at the time on Friday, or whether that's a tactic we'll see later in the season, remains to be seen. But it was quite exciting. Only half joking, of course. They're still going to play amazingly attacking football, because that's all they know. They've got some wonderful attacking talent, and adding Asosa Heki into a team which has already got Fakedi Manda and Michael Adams, to name but 2, as attacking threats, is just going to be a joy to watch. They're very keen to get on the front foot whenever they can. They like to play in transition. A lot of teams found that out last year. I think Monaro Panthers did it very well in that match you mentioned. They know that the O'Connor Knights wanted to play on the counter, so they spread the field a bit for them, so they couldn't. And in the end, it cost them. But they've got a good coaching team there. They've got a side that has got a lot of belief in themselves. They also have this the mentality, a bit like United back in the 90s, where they have no one likes us, we don't care, we're going to go out and do our thing, and woe betide anyone that gets in our way and stops us trying to do it. And it's a great mentality to have. It builds that cohesion and bonding between the team. It'd be interesting to see how the incoming players from the Wanderers build into that. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they've done that plenty in pre-season. As per usual, they've had a thorough pre-season preparation. They'll be really disappointed that they've gone out of the Australia Cup at this stage to a very good Gungahlin United side, but it will only make them even more determined to carry on from where they did last year, reclaim a top 4 spot, which was a fantastic achievement in their first year back, and perhaps go even further in the competition. And, once they've gone on a roll last year, they're difficult to stop, and you wouldn't bet against them again.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't. Michael, who do we have next up?
Next up is Tigers FC, Matt, with coach Jimmy Canaridis. They were 6th position in 2022, and their points and win-loss record, was 4 wins, 10 draws, and 7 defeats for 22 points. I feel that Tigers are one of the teams that have a lot to prove this campaign, given the struggles they endured last year. Obviously, we know the talent that they had at their disposal. I just think that they weren't obviously able to really put it together the way that they had wanted to out on the pitch. And I think that was a real reflection in the results that they picked up last season. And obviously a lot of draws, double-digit draws, goes to sort of show that most definitely, it's going to be interesting to see sort of what Jimmy will do with this team going forward. Obviously, bringing in a new manager will hopefully in their case sort of reinvigorate the team. And we've been so used to Tigers being sort of a stalwart club that's in and around the top four. So last season was a bit of a surprise in that case, that they weren't able to get over the line into the top four, something that we're not sort of used to seeing in recent memory. But I can be sure that the squad will be eager to get back into the top four. So we'll see how Jimmy does as manager of this squad. And some key additions for this outfit are some players that we had sort of briefly touched on earlier in the show. You've got Emilio Kishta and Nikos Kalfas coming in. You've got Christian Tanoski and Nikola Taneski that have come in. So you've got 4 very, very good additions there to sort of go along with that narrative of getting Tigers back to where they feel they belong, which is, competing inside the top 4 and even beyond that. Some key outs for them is a player that, Russ was talking about at length there. Rocco Stricker and Antoni Timotheo has also left the Tigers. So some key departures there, but like I said, they've made some really good additions, and it's going to be a really, really interesting season for Tigers FC to sort of see where they're at and how they'll bounce back from what they went through last season. Russ, do you really play sort of into that narrative as much in terms of, we're so used to seeing Tigers up there in the table, competing well, getting results, having some of the best players, and one of the most sort of the in-depth squads in the competition, and they just weren't able to get it right last season. So how do you sort of foresee their 2023 season going?
Well, 10 draws suggests they're not too far away, doesn't it? I mean, 10 draws is only a goal away from an extra 10 wins. And if they'd even turned 3 or 4 of those draws into victories last year, they would have made the top 4. So they're not too far away, and they weren't too far away last year. And what they've done is gone out and really recruited very heavily, and they've brought in some really big names. Other names that you didn't mention in your list, Marko Milutinovic, that's coming at the back from Logan Lightning. Really exciting Japanese midfielder in Tomohiro Ogawa, who played on the weekend. I thought he was really tidy when he came on. They quite like the look of him. And Thomas Robertson, who slotted into left back. But what they've got, and I mentioned Carl Senior before, who will play in central defence for them as a big loss for Monaro. With that, though, comes expectation. You've got big names on that list, players that you mentioned in Kalfas Kishta, Christian Tanoski and Nick Taneski, players that win things, players that are expected to win things. And all of a sudden, the expectation of that group has gone up exponentially. And that's something that Jimmy Canarides and his crew are going to have to live with, because every week they go out there and every week you guys go through the predictions. You'll look at the lineups and you'll go, well, they'll be expected to win because of the team that they've got out on the park. And that's not even including the players that are going to be in and around that group as well. The bench is going to be really strong. We've mentioned on this show numerous times over the previous 70-odd episodes that we've done that you don't win league titles with 1 to 11. You win league titles with 12 through 18 and potentially even further in this competition. So it's going to be a season for them where they're going to have to perform. They didn't on Saturday in the Australian Cup game. They looked a bit disjointed against a Canberra Croatia side that looked far more fluid. Whether that was because they've not played that formation before, I don't know, because I haven't seen much of them in pre-season. But they've got really good individuals that haven't really gelled as a unit yet. Now, I expect they will, because you've got players of that ilk. They're not going to be that disjointed all the time. They're going to find a way, and they'll find a way to win football matches. There's so much talent in this side. You cannot write them off at any stage. And going particularly, let's pretend we've not seen anything in pre-season. You're looking at names on a piece of paper, which in some respects we are. You'd have to say they're one of the title favourites.
Absolutely, Russ. Couldn't agree more based on sort of what you just said there. They've got some great players, so we'll sort of see how that goes to begin the season, and if they're going to gel quickly or if it's going to take time. But we'll wait and see. Matt, who have we got next up?
Before we move on, what do we think of the Tigers rebrand with the orange and the sort of going for the
I really like it.
Yeah,
I really like it. I thought it looked really good on the weekend. I understand that watching it on the TV, it was a bit of a clash with the red of Canberra Croatia. It's never really, it's really difficult sometimes when you're broadcasting if you've got two colours the same. In real life, it didn't look that bad, but the actual colours themselves are very striking, very dynamic. And what it does do, I think they've got their sizes imported. So they're a little bit smaller than what they potentially could be. So their players suddenly look like giants. They look like absolute hulks. And when you watch them and you go out, I mean, they're quite an imposing outfit anyway. They've got some tall, strong players in that team. But I really like the rebranding. I quite like the new badge as well. It's a good direction for them. And yeah, I wish them all the very best because I think that those colours will be flying high at some stage this season, without a doubt.
Yeah, no, that's I rate the branding. Next up, we've got Tuggeranong United, coached by Mitch Stevens. 2022 position was, of course, first in CPL, promoted to NPL. Their win-loss record was 16 wins, 2 draws, 3 losses, 50 points overall. Like I mentioned, they were the league champions in CPL in 2022. Also won the 2022 CPL Grand Final. Let's not forget how they won that in fashion with Adam Furch with the overhead kick late in the second half of extra time. Perfect way to win a final, and also a perfect way for Adam to hang up his boots and call it a career also. Mitch Stevens' men, of course, last year, like we've mentioned a few times, laid the blueprint for how clubs can sort of handle and treat relegation, which we've mentioned a few times for Belconnen, who will be in CPL this year. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do the same thing as Tuggeranong. But in terms of Tuggeranong, they've been able to retain some key players from last season, which of course is huge for them because we saw such a huge cohesion with that team. We saw a great camaraderie there. The likes of Walker, Hislop, and Stevens especially were absolutely stellar in CPL. So it'll be interesting to see how they go in the NPL. They've lost the likes of Harrison Bunell, who has taken up an awesome opportunity at Wollongong Wolves, and from what I've understood, he's started quite a bit for them. So that's awesome to see there for the young lad. And also during his interview in pre-season with me, you could sort of tell the like I mentioned before, the joy and camaraderie. You can see that in the group, so you know they're not they won't be considered the favourites. They'll know that, but I'm sure internally they obviously know their strengths, and they probably fancy themselves at upsetting a few big teams here or there, and they'll be looking to prove everyone wrong and show that that 2021 for them wasn't the season they intended, and they proved that last year in CPL. Now they want to prove that again in NPL. So Russ, a lot for Tuggeranong United to prove. What do you make of them heading into this campaign? Obviously, keeping the likes of the players that I mentioned will be crucial for them. And if anyone hasn't seen them in CPL, they're in for a treat with some of those players.
Yeah, they've got a really good group, and Mitch hasn't really done an awful lot in the transfer market outside of keeping that group together. They've lost Harrison Bunell and Adam Fritsch. You mentioned Dean Tomeski and Sean Kiddy are another couple that have moved on, but they brought in Jordan Keisha from Monaro Panthers, which I think is a really astute signing. He can filling in a number of positions for them in the back. Kunyet Kaglar has come across from White Eagles as a proven goal scorer in the CPL. Daniel Hurl's back from overseas as well, so he'll play in midfield for them, which adds a bit. He used to play for the Panthers. Rory Evans has come across from Western Molonglo, a central defender who impressed a lot last year. And Martin Deng is back, is with Tuggeranong, very experienced, and he'll bring an older head to that younger group. He's got 97 NPL appearances under his belt already, so that's more than the rest of the league team combined. Quite like the luck of young Clancy Hislop when I saw a glimpse of him in the Cup on Wednesday. The younger brother of Pat Hislop, a tricky little winger. What they will need to do, Tuggeranong United, is take the chances that they create. They're not going to get as many as they did in the CPL, just because of the very nature of where they are in the competition. They're playing against better players now. They're in the NPL, so obviously the standard is higher. So maybe those chances that they were missing a couple of times last year, they'll need to be a bit more clinical in the front third. There's going to be a lot of expectation on Sam Walker, We've seen a lot of him last year. He was very good with the amount of goals and assists he came up with. Luke Stevens as well in that front third, and Caglar will slot in also. Young Angus McLaughlin played on Wednesday in the Cup in a holding midfield role. He's the younger brother of Meg McLaughlin, who played for Monaro Panthers, Canberra Olympic and Canberra United in the W-League. So he's got a bit of pedigree about him too. And their goalkeepers have got to be on form. They've got 3 goalkeepers in James Benevento, Adam Stevens, who we saw play for Wagga City Wanderers in the CPL Reserves final last year, was man of the match, and young Pete Philippa. They're going to need to be in top form as well, because there's going to be more chances coming against them as there were, as opposed to last year as well. So for Tuggeranong United, I think it's a season of consolidation. The important thing for them is to stay up, is to get in this division, put themselves about, push for that top 4. They'll have ambitions for it. Of course they will. Everybody has ambitions for the top 4. But the important thing for them is to let opposition teams know that they've been there. You guys have been to Canberra too. We've seen plenty of games down there. It's a foreboding place to play, I should say. When the crowd get on your back down at Canberra too, there's not very many places to hide, and it's going to be important for them to pick up home points. I'm looking forward to seeing them. Looking forward to seeing this young, exciting, exuberant side that Mitch Stevens has put together take on some of these big guns in the Premier League. And as you said, Matt, I think there's a real possibility that they could ruffle a few feathers and upset a few of the more fancied teams this year.
It certainly will be interesting to see how Tuggeranong go. Michael, who do we have last up?
Last up, we have West Canberra Wanderers, coached by Dom English and George Economopoulos. So we've got a dual managerial situation going on in West Canberra. Obviously, the only side that are doing something like this. In 2022, they finished 7th. Their points and win-loss record was 4 wins, 5 draws, 12 losses for 17 points. They obviously had a fantastic cup run last season where they made the Australian Cup qualifying final, where they finished runners-up to Monaro Panthers in that instance. You know, they'll no doubt, this club will no doubt be looking to sort of thrive in 2023 after successfully avoiding relegation last season. We know sort of how close that relegation battle got between themselves and Belconnen United, and obviously and ultimately it was Belconnen United that ended up being the side relegated. So a massive sigh of relief in that instance for West Canberra to keep their status in the NPL competition. And, you know, a huge mention that I think has been already been brought up, that's more of a sort of negative for this side, is, you know, they've lost, you know, essentially their entire backline from last season. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see the players that will fill those positions and how they will perform at the back. So it's going to be really interesting to sort of see how West Canberra go, but not only just their backline, they've obviously had a massive overhaul, which I'm sure Russ will share with us in a moment when I cross to him. But, you know, this will be another team that's, you know, going to be fighting for their sort of survival in the NPL. They'll use what they went through last season as, you know, a real sort of confidence boost in terms of, you know, they show that they can hang in there. And like I mentioned with Olympic earlier in the show, they managed to pick up some really good results, particularly at the start of last season. And then it sort of just started to get away from them as the sort of season hit the midpoint and beyond. But, you know, they're certainly capable of producing a surprise here and there, West Canberra Wanderers, and I'm really interested to sort of see how they go. In terms of key additions to the squad, we've got Riley Brown, Jack Majory Banks, and Harry Truman, that come into the squad. Their key outs, Lachlan Fields, Jackson Paisler, Blaise Veslovsky, and Jacob Wiseman. So we mentioned already those names in the shows when previewing some of the other clubs that have picked up those players respectively. Russ, what do you make of West Canberra? Obviously, and I'm sure you're going to get into it, they've had a massive overhaul. Essentially a whole new squad is what we're looking at here. What are you sort of expecting from West Canberra Wanderers, and how difficult will they find it in the competition this year compared to, say, last season?
Well, I think most people that watch NPL in Canberra were looking on in the summer months and seeing player after player after player depart that football club. Shay Thornton's gone as well, amongst plenty of others that you mentioned. There's 16 players have left that club in the summer, which is an enormous amount for turnover. So there was all doom and gloom, and everybody's like, well, how are they even going to recover from this? What are they going to be able to do? We've been asking these questions internally in our little chats, and the football talk around town's been asking these things as well. Well, we got a glimpse of it last night, didn't we? In the cup, they brought in a dozen players, and you think, well, you start from scratch. It's a brand new squad, and a lot of these boys have come through the junior ranks, but the ones they brought in have been excellent. Riley Brown was outstanding yesterday. His little partnership with Angus Bailey is going to cause all sorts of problems. They found themselves a centre forward in Nick Rufagalis, who scored 2 really good goals and ran hard, worked his socks off yesterday. They've got Harry Truman, who came off the bench and bagged a couple. He's a proven goal scorer. If they can get him fit and firing as well, they've suddenly got options. Babin Pordell was there too, off the bench yesterday. Defensively, they got a young lad in called Abdullah Khaled Abbas. Apparently he's an Afghanistani refugee. Doesn't speak a word of English apparently, but he was brilliant yesterday. Outstanding at centre back alongside Roy Romeo. Yes, they were playing Canberra Juventus, a team they would expect to beat, but it was the manner in which they did it, the composure, the professionalism, the way they played the ball around. The addition of Doug Woodywis, who we watched in the Capital Futsal League as well, come in, was a huge bonus for them, playing in the number 6 role. He just patrolled in front of the back 4. He allowed Bailey and Riley Brown to move backwards and forwards and get involved as much as they wanted to. The wingers got involved. They've got big raps on Ibrahim Obeid out wide. He was brilliant last night. He's got some really good skills. So, yeah, it's not as much as doom and gloom as perhaps we thought. Dom English and George Economopoulos have got pulled the wool over the eyes of some people, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they go. Now, much like with the Tigers, we talked about how cohesion is important in this league, and momentum is important. And you mentioned it, Michael, when you were summing up. It might take them a couple of weeks to get into gear with this group. Didn't look like it yesterday, but there's sterner tests to come for them. Last year they were a cup side, weren't they? They were excellent in the cup. They got all the way through the final. They were 1 kick away from winning the competition, and that was with a team that, in inverted commas, struggled at the wrong end of the table. So maybe they can turn it around this year. Maybe they can find some cohesion and some more better momentum to keep them going through. They've also got the bonus of playing on Mero synthetic, which nobody particularly likes to go and play on, even though it's a nice flat surface, and no one likes playing on the synthetic for some reason. I think it's probably to do with injuries or however. But they've got a group out there now, which I think Dom and George are going to be really keen to work with. They look like they're a keen group that wants to learn. And much like Tuggeranong United, they're probably going to surprise far more teams than we thought they might.
Absolutely. Matt, do we want to get into the NPL Round 1 fixtures?
Yeah, I'll quickly just list off the matches that we have first up. Russ mentioned this one earlier, what he's dubbed the Chavapi Derby, the Croatian Derby. O'Connor Knights v Canberra Croatia, Saturday, April 1st, 3 p.m. from O'Connor enclosed. Then we've got Canberra Olympic up against West Canberra Wanderers, Saturday, April 1st, 3 p.m. at the AIS Grassfield 2. Then we have probably my favourite of Russ's dubs of derbies and matches. Monaro Panthers v Tigers FC, the Battle of the Big Cats, Saturday, April 1st, 5:30 p.m. at Riverside. And then we've got, of course, the return of Tuggeranong United against Gungahlin United, Sunday, April 2nd, 3 p.m. from Canberra 201. Are there any matches that stand out to you there, Russ, before we wrap up?
Yeah, well, the Chavapi Derby wasn't actually my idea. The clubs that came out with that themselves. We were looking for a name for it, and I think we chucked that one in as a bit of a joke at the start of last season, and it's kind of stuck. So we'll see how we go with that. Look, we start our games on Friday. Our first match with Jeremy is a Friday night game in the WNPL, which you'll talk about with Jeremy a bit later down the track. And then on Saturday, I've got 2 matches. We're going to go to the Chavapi Derby. Myself and Frank Keisha will be on that one at 3 o'clock, and then we'll hot tail it across to the Riverside for the Battle of the Big Cats at 5:45. And then Sunday, Ian Worthington will join me at Canberra 2 for Tuggeranong Gungahlin. what we love about round one is the hope and expectation of every club that goes out there. You're not going to win the league in round one. You're not going to get relegated in round one. There's no real pressure on the clubs. There's expectation from their fans and from within, and from us as a media group that we'll expect and we'll expect certain things. But it's they can play with a bit of freedom. They can show us some things that perhaps we haven't already seen. I'm sure each one of our coaches, which you mentioned in all those teams, they're all very cerebral thinkers that like to think about the game, and sometimes they overthink about the game, but it gives them an opportunity to come up with something different. And I'm really looking forward to all of them. We're not covering the Olympic Wanderers game in terms of commentary on the Saturday. We'll be picking those teams up the following week. But even that game there's got a fair amount about it. It's important to get off to a good start in round one. I think it can give you that momentum to build on the season. But as we saw last year, 21 rounds of football is a long time in Canberra, especially when we hit those winter months when it gets a bit cold and the rain starts falling and potentially the snow comes down and the field gets hard. And you want the players to dig in. It's going to be a fantastic season. I've not been excited about a season so much for quite some time. I think you look at that group of 8 clubs that we've got there, and you mentioned it at the top of the broadcast, Matt. You can almost chuck them all in a bowl, pull them out and go, that's your 8 in that order. And it's as good a way as any to pick who's going to win this thing. I can't wait for it. Super excited. And we'll be here every step of the way for Bar TV Sports. Capitalfootball.com.au will bring you all the news, reviews. You can follow us on Facebook and my own personal account on the social media, bringing you stuff, you guys as well. And of course, here on the M&M podcast, where we'll be dissecting it every week and deciding what went right and what went wrong. And I'd just like to make a shout out as well, because we never give them a preview. New referees group this year as well. There'll be some new referees that you'll see in the middle that perhaps you saw on the sideline last year, and the assistant referees making the step up into the middle. Wish them all the best as well. I think we've got an exciting season for them too. What I'm really enjoying, having seen the Australia Cup, is the interaction between our match officials and the players so far. It's been very, very good. It's been better than I've seen it for a long time, and long may it continue.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, and that's obviously been a topic for a while, so it's good to see that's has looked very good in pre-season. Michael, any last words from you before we head off?
No, I mean, there's just so much to look forward to. I mean, we've talked about it pretty much from top to bottom in everything we've discussed in the show, from, you know, the news around the A-League expansion for Canberra, each of the NPL sort of sides, players taking opportunities to play outside of Canberra and overseas. You know, an exciting round one is upon us as well. And, you know, as Russ sort of mentioned there at the end about the new refereeing group and the interaction between the referees and the players, it's very pleasing news to hear. And like Russ mentioned, it's something that we want to see consistently throughout the year. Just positive and, you know, respectful interactions between the players on the pitch and the referee in the middle. It's going to make our game better and better for the viewer as well. So there's so much to look forward to. It's a really exciting time, I think, not only just in the NPL, but football in Canberra in general. It's heading in a really good direction, and hopefully that continues over, you know, this season and into the future as well.
I'll give you guys a little bit of a heads up as well as I can here. There will be a new a respect campaign this year as well, which we're working on right now. The Reduce Abuse campaign will be pushed to the back a bit, and there'll be a new campaign which will focus on the game as a whole. Hopefully it goes down well and everybody gets on board with it. And I'll leave you with the fact that keep an eye out on the social media accounts this week, because we've been working on an NPL promo for the return of Bar TV. And I think we've got something pretty cool, which Dion Sturgiopoulos, I think that's how we pronounce his surname, has put together for me as part of his intern project with players from a lot of the clubs and some highlights of the footage. It's come out really well. So get behind that if you can. Please share it around and join us on Bar TV.
That sounds awesome. We'll definitely give that a share when we can. That's it for us. This isn't the end of the previews. We've got NPLW coming up in the next few days. Next week, most likely, we'll have the CPL. And there's a whole bunch of interviews that I have there with majority of the coaches. So if you still want to know more about NPL previews. I've interviewed the majority of the coaches there up on the Facebook page, on the Instagram as well. So give those a look, and of course, check out Capital Football. I'm sure Russ and the rest of the team will have written previews up there also. So there's a whole bunch for people to check out when you can. That's us here from M&M Podcast, the Canberra Football Show, episode 71. Welcome back. It's 2023, everyone.